Hi, everybody there in YouTube land. It's John, and I'm back here for another episode of Musings of a Marine. We're going to continue our series on my trips to the Philippines. It's been 5 months, but what happened was my last phone stopped working, and I don't understand why it did, but I ended up getting a new phone, and so now I can start back with this. Know some other people are doing YouTube videos, and it's a great thing, and I'm glad that I can be back. So, last time that I did a video, we talked about my second trip to the Philippines with my wife. We're going to talk about the third trip now. Sadly, this trip was because my father-in-law, Pedro, was dying of cancer. And the fortunate thing was my wife Diana and I were able to get there 6 days before he passed. So we got to say our goodbyes. He did know that it was us that were there. Seemed happy that I even was there to see him, and I certainly was happy myself to see him off. Just a good man who had been through a lot of things in life and just loved his family and especially his grandkids very, very much. So we get over there, and it was also just a great continuation of my friendship with my nephew, Baba. He wasn't going to school at the time where Annette, my niece, and my nephew, Pito, were going to a nursing school. And Baba hadn't really figured out what he was going to do yet. He'd been looking after Papa, and so him and I got to hang out. Basically, he was given the task of entertaining me, and I was certainly happy to have his company. So, as it was, unfortunately, my brother-in-law Ali, who was trying to get there before Papa passed, and there was that stupid volcano in Iceland decided to erupt about that time, and Ali and his family couldn't get out of London because of all the crud that blew into the air as a result. It was grounding a lot of flights out of even London. So, volcanic ash can travel thousands of miles. So that was unfortunate. So he didn't get there before Papa passed. And the way that went down was a defining moment. And it just realized um, just not only that I was becoming part of the DeStyle family, but also uh, how close Bob and I were becoming. Because what it came down to was this: there was a family discussion in Papa's room about whether to keep him alive before Ali arrived. Papa was in great pain. He was in agonizing pain, so much that he was hallucinating. The doctors had said there was nothing they could do for him. He was going to die. And the only thing keeping him alive was, the feeding tube and whatnot. And, you know, it was my opinion, we got to let this man go. Okay. And if we don't, he is really, really going to continue to suffer. And that's not what you want to see happen. So, I was pretty upset that the family was even considering keeping him alive. And while we're having this discussion, Baba sensed that. And he says to me, Tito John, let's go over to the chapel and pray. He wanted me out of that room, and understandably so, because he knew I was getting upset about it. So that's what we did. And fortunately, in my opinion, it came to pass that they were going to decide to just let him go. And during all this time, Bob and I were going to resorts. We were going swimming, hanging out in the pools together, having a lot of fun. And boy, if he wasn't my best buddy over there already, he really became that on this trip. And it was kind of a bummer for me from a professional standpoint. I had gotten into car sales. Things were starting to finally click for me, and then this happened, and I had to leave the dealership for 3 weeks, but it was so worth it. And even though I was anxious to come back, it was really sad to say goodbye to the people there. And as it was, we had the wake, and boy, was that an eye-opening experience for me because I'd never seen a Filipino wake before. And it occurred to me, particularly at this one, that it felt like a Vegas night here in the United States with a dead person laying amongst everybody. And then that might be a pretty bad description of it, but that's kind of what it was. And here's Papa laying in state in our living room, and you got people out there gambling, doing all kinds of playing cards, playing mahjong, whatever, and drinking beer and getting drunk and having a good old time. And you'd expect maybe a little bit more somber mood throughout all of this, but actually, that created a lot of fun times too. It's sad to say, but even when somebody passes, when people get together, there's still laughter, and there certainly was. And so I got to learn a card game that was similar to Rummy here in the United States, and we had some pretty crazy times during this wake too. One night the stove caught on fire. Another night we actually had our earthquake for about 10 seconds. It wasn't raining during that time, so we had a drought, and our well actually ran out of water for half a day. A lot of crazy stuff. And I remember one time we got home and from shopping, and we were going to celebrate my sister-in-law Hilda's birthday, and we had the famous Filipino brownout going on where we didn't have power for a while. And I made a mention. I says, "Come on, Papa, intercede for us. Let's get some power here in the house." This is. I want to mention also, this is in April, the end of April, and it is hotter than blazes. It's the hottest time of year over there. It's getting up to 100 degrees, 90% humidity, just insane. And we don't have any air. We can't run the fans, anything. So I asked Papa to intercede on our behalf, and wouldn't you know it, lo and behold, about 5 minutes later, the power kicks back on. So thank you, Papa, for that one. And thank you, Lord, because I know you were watching us in that situation. And then when we had the actual funeral at the cemetery, me being a lector at church at the time, I got to do one of the readings. And the thing that I found a little disappointing at that funeral was the priest, as always, would ask if anybody wanted to come up and say a few words. And I was very happy that my wife Diana did. At least somebody would. Could you stand up there and say something, about this wonderful man and, how he touched your life and why you loved him? And nobody wanted to do it. And I really learned just how passive sometimes Filipino people can be and how shy they can be. I was afraid Diana was going to ask me to say something, and I would be like, well, what do you want me to say? I didn't really know the guy that well, though we did have some conversations. Clearly we liked one another, but that was kind of sad that I felt that nobody wanted to go up and do that. But, that just is, by the same token, one of the reasons why I love Filipinos is because they're not outspoken for the most part or rude unless they're intoxicated. And that pretty much applies to everybody in this world. So anyway, so that was pretty much how my third trip went there. And other than that, there was nothing too exciting. We didn't really go anywhere or do anything special, but it was great to have, my brother-in-law Romeo fly over there with Diana and I, and accompany us on the trip. And it was great to have Ali there with his wife and his son Kenji. And so it was a great family reunion despite the situation. And happy to see everybody But oh, it was so hot, and I'll tell you, I've never felt heat like that in my life. And every day, if we weren't at a swimming pool, we were in the mall where it was air conditioned somewhere just to try and beat the heat. It was ridiculous. But one other thing that kind of goes in hand with all of that, it was this one resort that Bob and I and Pito would go to, and then the rest of the family did one day. The new in thing over there was the foot spa, where you'd stick your feet in this water and all these little fish would come in there and chew the dead skin off your feet. And I thought it pretty cool, but sometimes the fish would take a pretty good bite out of you. So it would generally would tickle a little bit, but sometimes, as Baba would call him, the striker would come in there and bite you good. And so it was interesting to go through that and experience that too. So anyways, that was pretty much what trip number 3 with Diana was like. We're going to sign off for now. It's great to be back. Sad that I've been away for so long. Somebody reminded me that I hadn't done one of these videos in a long time, and it was high time that I did again with this new phone. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. God bless y'all, and Semper Fi.